Welcome to the SWIB Podcast, where members of the Wisconsin retirement system can turn for timely information on the investments that help fund the state's pension system. I'm Chris Preisler, Communications Specialist for the State of Wisconsin Investment Board, or SWIB.
And I'm Dusty Weiss, producer of the podcast.
As part of its sophisticated and diverse investment strategy, the State of Wisconsin Investment Board makes investments in companies and funds across the country and around the world as part of a disciplined, prudent, and innovative approach to market opportunities that ultimately benefit the Wisconsin retirement system. But did you know that part of that strategy includes making investments right here in Wisconsin? Through its two dedicated portfolios that focus on Wisconsin, SWIB's private debt program and Wisconsin venture capital portfolio have invested in opportunities that provide both positive investment returns for the WRS, but also enhance economic growth in the state. Today, we welcome back to the podcast SWIB portfolio manager Chris Prestigiacomo. We will talk to Chris about the investments SWIB's private debt and venture capital portfolios hold in Wisconsin companies. Chris will share the types of investments being made through these portfolios, the positive impact the two portfolios have had on the WRS trust funds, as well as the state's economy, and what the current private debt and venture capital ecosystems look like in Wisconsin.
The SWIB Podcast is a regular opportunity for you to learn more about the people and funds that comprise the Wisconsin retirement system. Please make sure you subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode. Share this podcast with your fellow WRS members and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts so it's easier for other members to find this show.
Chris, welcome back to the SWIB Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to have you back, Chris. It's always kind of fun to sort of pop the hood and take a look under at what we've got going on in SWIB's private debt and venture capital portfolios. Of course, you're responsible for managing those. These are dedicated portfolios that focus on Wisconsin, which is what makes this so interesting. So can you give us just a little bit of background on each one of those portfolios?
Happy to do so. Dusty, as you mentioned, I manage two portfolios here at SWIB. One is a private debt portfolio and the other is a venture capital portfolio. So I'll start with an overview of the private debt portfolio first. So that portfolio actually was launched back in the 60s. So it's one of the longest kind of tenured portfolios at SWIB. You go from kind of the start of the portfolio back in the 60s through today. You know, we've been a pretty valuable partner to a lot of companies, hundreds of companies here in the state of Wisconsin, making over $2.7 billion worth of loans. The private debt portfolio has a number of Wisconsin opportunities in the portfolio where we have made loans to businesses that are either headquartered in the state of Wisconsin or have major operations in the state of Wisconsin. And our mandate is to make long-term investments in Wisconsin companies through private transactions to maintain an average investment-grade credit profile of the private debt portfolio. Our mandate allows us to fill a specific need by making this direct financing available, especially to companies that are unable to secure the attention of larger investors. You know, we often collaborate with the company's banks and other institutional investors and can provide long-term loans that complement the bank's shorter-term financing, but doesn't compete with the bank's other services that they're providing these businesses. So a lot of times the banks will provide like lines of credit, a revolver. They'll take care of their cash management, treasury management, merchant services, a bunch of other products. We're not looking for any of that business from the borrower. We're just looking to find good opportunities to make loans to Wisconsin businesses. You know, our edge or the opportunity that we have is we can lend our capital to Wisconsin businesses that may not have access to institutional capital. And so we can actually make longer term loans with longer maturities. We can do things that are maybe a little bit more nuanced in terms of structure than a lot of other kind of debt lenders can do. The second portfolio is the Wisconsin venture capital portfolio. That portfolio was actually launched in 1999, 2000. And over the past 20 or so years, we've allocated about $400 million to the Wisconsin venture capital portfolio, which represents roughly 20% of our total venture capital investment. So we have a larger venture capital portfolio that's global, but of that global portfolio, about 20% of that is targeted towards Wisconsin opportunities. While our investment history in venture is a bit shorter than it is in private debt, our commitment runs pretty deep, and we still have a pretty major impact on the local startup ecosystem. We not only invest in local venture funds, but we also invest in companies on a direct basis. And then we'll also leverage our extensive network to help and introduce our startup companies to other VCs around the country, which we think that's a big value add that we can provide our startup companies. And then lastly, we do try and help and promote the Wisconsin early stage ecosystem broadly outside of the state.
Yeah, certainly there's a benefit there for the Wisconsin business ecosystem, but what would you say the goals are for these portfolios? It's not just to invest in Wisconsin companies.
Yeah, no, our foremost responsibility is to generate strong returns to ensure the financial security of the current and future retirees of the Wisconsin retirement system. Our belief, and this isn't just my portfolio, but it's all of our portfolios and all of our investors here at SWIB. So we want to generate strong investment returns and maintain the fiduciary duty that we owe to the trust funds that we do manage. The one thing that I'll mention, however, is, SWIB has been a longstanding financial partner for Wisconsin businesses, both on the debt and the venture side for decades. We stand out in the sense that we're one of only a few public pension plans that have a dedicated team that's resourced to focus on both debt and venture in state. So that's it's a pretty unique feature that we do have. If we can identify investments that not only deliver great returns, but also foster growth for a company or, contribute positively to a local community, that's a win-win for us and everyone else that's involved. And for years, we've been making investments in Wisconsin, and we're going to continue to do that. There's great opportunities here. There's no reason why we shouldn't be investing in our backyard, but have to do it in an appropriate way across all of our asset classes. So that's both public and private. As of June 30th, 2024, we have invested almost $9 billion in companies that are either headquartered in the state or have more than 100 employees in Wisconsin.
So that's definitely a significant investment in Wisconsin. Chris, can you give us some examples of the companies in both portfolios that SWIB is invested in? I think there's some names that our listeners might recognize.
Yeah, absolutely. So, approximately 40% of SWIB's private debt portfolio is invested in Wisconsin opportunities. As of June 30 of 2024, we had loans to about 60 borrowers, totaling approximately $750 million. The average loan balance was about $7 million. And we've worked with a number of companies over the years, and some current companies or more recent companies that we've worked with include Daybreak Foods, which is in the agriculture space, Kimberly-Clark. Everybody knows Kimberly-Clark, Johnson Bank, which is a very well-known financial institution here in the state of Wisconsin, Marshfield Clinic, and TrueStage, which does a lot of good work with credit unions across the United States, just to name a few of our debt portfolio companies. On the venture side, again, we're investing in both funds as well as early stage companies on a direct basis. So in the portfolio today, there's about 15 funds that are focused on Wisconsin. The portfolio has active direct investments of, I think we have 7 or 8 companies in the portfolio today. As of June 30, we've got about $250 million of committed/invested capital, again, in funds and directly into companies. And some of the venture capital investments from a company perspective that we've made include Elephas, which is a biotech company located here in Madison, Wisconsin, that's doing some pretty interesting things around cancer diagnostics and treatment. TomoTherapy is a company that we invested in the past, New Wave Medical, and then Invenra, which is in the drug therapy space. All great companies, all in our backyard, and we think we'll make nice returns in those and have made nice returns in those investments.
So those companies are really doing some exciting work, and WRS members and really anyone that's interested can get a deeper understanding of these portfolios and the investments that are being made. Every 2 years, SWIB is required by state statutes to publish a goals for investing in Wisconsin report. This past December, SWIB released its most recent goals report. Can you tell us a little bit about the report and what type of information readers might find in it?
Yeah, for sure. So, Chris, as you said, we're required by state statutes to report on a biennial basis to the governor and to the legislature. It's on a 4-year plan for making investments in Wisconsin. And we also have to respond to some comments that are solicited from the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation on ways that we can support and grow Wisconsin's economy. The report includes investments in public markets, both stocks and bonds, and portfolios that are actively managed primarily by SWIB staff, but some investments delegated to external managers as well as internally managed index portfolios.
So, Chris, certainly a lot of details in a report like that. And for those of us who maybe want to crack it open and read the whole thing, can you break down some of the numbers in the report for us? It's taking a look at fiscal years 2025 through 2028. What are we going to find in there?
Yeah. So since the last reporting period in 2022, we've made new investments totaling over $800 million in fiscal 2023 and nearly about $1.2 billion in fiscal year 2024. Again, those investments in companies are either headquartered or have more than 100 employees within the state.
So taking a look into the future then, Chris, what are the projections for new investments in Wisconsin companies for the next 4 years?
Yeah, so over the next 4 years, the projections range from $1.4 billion to nearly $3.7 billion. And the projections are based on recent historical trends and future expectations, but actual results depend on many factors, including changes in the investment markets and asset allocation. The world is becoming more and more complicated, so things can change pretty quickly, whether it's a news headline or a tweet.
It kind of begs a question then, how do you come up with those numbers? What do you and your team do to come up with those projections?
Yeah, so a couple of things really play into what we're expecting to invest on a go-forward basis. We do look back historically and see what we've done over the past couple of years. And then we'll look forward and we'll look at the markets that we are all investing in. So on the debt side, we're looking at the fixed income markets. On the venture side, we're looking on what's going on in the venture market. If it's going to be targeted towards Wisconsin, we look at the opportunities that are here. And if we think that the markets are strong and there are opportunities within the state, we'll make those investments. We're very opportunistic. If we feel like there aren't great opportunities in our respective markets, we don't need to deploy capital. Again, at the end of the day, we're all about generating strong market rate returns on a risk-adjusted basis. If the markets aren't providing good returns, either we won't participate or we'll look for new opportunities. And then there are other things that we can do. I mean, on the debt side, to kind of grow the portfolio, we can offer different types of capital. So we can do floating rate, we can do mezzanine, we can do senior unsecured, senior secured. So offering different products to borrowers helps us grow the portfolio. And on the venture side, there are certain things that we can do in addition to primary fund investments. We can also do secondaries. That's been a pretty attractive space over the past couple of years in venture, and also do more on the direct side to increase the investment pacing. But again, it has to make sense from what's going on in the market and the future returns of those investments that we're making today.
So if you guys target a certain amount of money that you want to deploy in a given year, and you either are falling short of that amount or you're like, wow, this is really great and we need more, what's the process at SWIB in terms of either reallocating those funds or getting more funds to make sure you're hitting all the opportunities that are really presenting themselves?
Over the past 18 to 24 months, venture capital, it's been a more challenging venture environment, higher interest rates, inflation, lots of regulatory hurdles, making it difficult for companies to go public or making it difficult for, let's call it the big tech, to buy smaller tech companies. And as a result of that, the pacing of our managers investing in startup companies slowed. And because it slowed, their need to come back to market to raise new funds slowed. So we go through this pretty formal pacing plan within privates. So we try and figure out what we think we're going to deploy on an annual basis, and we forecast that out, and we have assumptions regarding inflation and distributions and things like that. And it's a model, right? So over the past 2 years and more of 2024, we were anticipating of committing or investing roughly $500 million for the year. Well, because the environment changed, things slowed down, we only did about 300. We could have done more if we wanted to, but we just didn't see anything that made us really excited and wanting to deploy that capital. So we don't feel forced we got to put capital out there, which is a nice luxury. If the investments aren't there and the returns aren't there, we're not going to put the money to work. So we did 300 of 500. And this year will probably be a little bit lighter too in terms of where we're pacing, just because the environment's not back yet. So I'm unsure yet how the year will play out, both from a pacing perspective as well as ultimately where the markets end up.
And SWIB's really at an advantage the way it's structured to make those investments, right? I mean, really all the SWIB portfolio managers have the ability to pivot and make those investment decisions that they need to make throughout the year, unlike a lot of other public pensions where maybe the process is a little just bogged down, right?
Oh, absolutely. So, we internally we call it the SWIB edge. So SWIB staff has full investment discretion. So the board of the trustees basically establish our investment guidelines. And as long as we stay within those guidelines, the investment discretion is passed down to staff. So we can move really fast. So when markets do become a little bit more volatile or turbulent, and a lot of our peers are pulling back, we can actually lean in and do a little bit more. And that's actually where you make the investment returns. And we have that flexibility.
So you mentioned a little earlier that Wisconsin investments can be made across various asset classes that SWIB invests in. Can you just take a moment and break down for us where you see that money being invested in terms of asset classes for fiscal years 2025 to 2028?
Yeah, for sure. So the largest projected investment amounts are still being targeted for public equities. So the projected 1-year range is between 200 million and 400 million. And then over 4 years, we're projecting investments in the $800 million to $1.6 billion range. The second largest kind of amount is for public fixed income. And so the 1-year target is between 150 million to 500 million. And over 4 years, we're projecting investments of between 600 million and approximately $2 billion. And then when we look into the private markets, we have a 1-year range of between 5 million and 30 million, and a 5-year projected range between 30 million and 80 million. So overall, we have a 1-year range of about 400 million to 900 million, and a 4-year projected range of between 1.4 billion and close to 4 billion.
And we should stress that these are just projected ranges and not targets, right? A lot of things, as you said, can influence where those final numbers land. You're not simply going to make investments just to hit those ranges.
Oh, correct. Yeah. As we discussed earlier, there are a number of factors that can influence, how much we're investing on an annual basis.
So I know we kind of danced around it a little bit earlier, but as things stand right now, how do you see these ecosystems responding to some of the factors that have caused big shifts in the national economy? Things like the geopolitical conflicts that are ongoing, the presidential election, the Federal Reserve's ongoing battle with inflation, changes in the workforce. Have these things caused less venture capital startups and companies putting a hold on taking out loans for expansion?
So I think the one thing that businesses like is they like stable markets. And I would say over the past few weeks, it's become less and less stable. I mean, it's been a really interesting past 5 months. I think the general tone after the election was that the incoming administration would be a little bit more pro-business related to regulation, particularly around the FTC, that would lead to increases in mergers and acquisitions and improvement in IPO activity. I made the comment earlier about the lack of liquidity in venture. Investors like SWIB invest their capital to earn returns that are commensurate with the risk that they're taking. And while paper profits are great, investors need the cash dollars back returned, plus some additional return on top of that. So we can, one, fulfill the responsibility to fund the retirement savings of our beneficiaries, but two, we do take some of those dollars and we reinvest those back into the managers and markets that we're all active in. And over the past couple of years, we haven't really seen as much liquidity coming back, which can and has impacted how much we're investing currently and into the future. So I guess what I would say is there is general optimism about the markets, but there are current geopolitical risks and some federal issues that potentially could cloud that optimism.
That's kind of a broad look. What about Wisconsin? And you talked a little bit about this early on in our discussion, but can you talk about the state specifically and what the ecosystem looks like here?
So from my vantage point, managing the debt and the venture portfolio, I continue to be quite bullish on Wisconsin. We have a strong and stable economy, which makes it easier for businesses to kind of plan their future, whether that's again through organic growth or mergers and acquisitions. We've got a good education system, a solid workforce. I think that the reshoring that everybody's talking about, the opportunities there could be a great benefit for Wisconsin and the Midwest. The Midwest and Wisconsin have a lot to offer with strong employment, a diverse kind of industry selection. We've got a significant presence of Fortune 1000 companies that are willing to invest capital locally. And we've seen that with a couple projects like Microsoft making a pretty significant commitment and investment in the state of Wisconsin. I think that's fantastic. And then we have leading academic institutions, an educated and dedicated workforce, and a good quality of life here. So I think that there's a lot of great things going on here in Wisconsin. I'm very optimistic about its future.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a bright future for the state. Chris, thanks for taking some time today to share with us how SWIB's private debt and venture capital portfolios are making significant investments in Wisconsin. It was a great discussion. Thanks again for joining us on the podcast.
Anytime, Chris. Thanks for the invite.
And thank you to all our listeners for checking out this episode of the SWIB Podcast.
The SWIB Podcast is brought to you by the State of Wisconsin Investment Board with editing by Matt Covarrubias and produced by PodCamp Media. Branded podcast production for business is podcampmedia.com.
Thanks again for listening. I'm Chris Preisler.
And I'm Dusty Weiss.